Story 1. Two ovarian cysts burst at the same time. I had to crawl to get to my phone to call for a ride to the emergency room. Story 2. Ovarian torsion resulted in the ovary rupturing and hemorrhaging. I would rate it a negative 200 out of 10. Just clarifying, this was my actual left ovary rupturing, not the rupture of an ovarian cyst. My ovary had large cysts on it, which were so heavy that the fallopian tube twisted on itself, cutting off blood supply to my ovary and causing the hemorrhagic rupture. I previously had my right ovary removed during a hysterectomy, and the left ovary was my last one. This resulted in immediate surgical menopause at age 31. Story 3. Sciatica. Herniated 5 discs at once. Did not walk for 2 years. There are many versions of hell. That is one of them. Story 4. Double transverse rectus abdominis muscle flap reconstruction after my second mastectomy. My skin lost too much elasticity from the previous radiation on my right side, so I could not do implants. The flap reconstruction is a complex surgery, where they take you apart and put you back together again, using your abdominal flesh and muscles to rebuild breasts. They performed the mastectomy and reconstruction at the same time, involving 3 surgical teams and about 18 hours from start until I woke up in the intensive care unit. I was 32, after having my first mastectomy, chemotherapy, and radiation when I was 23 and diagnosed with stage 3 triple-negative ductal carcinoma. The reconstruction took about a year to fully heal. This was almost 15 years ago now. I have the breast scars, of course, but the most interesting one is all the way around my middle, with only about 10 inches on my lower back left uncut. A month before this surgery, I had a hysterectomy, and they went in over that scar like it never happened. They warned me it was going to be harder than I thought. They were right. As hard as I thought it was going to be, and I was ready. All my previous surgeries and treatments had made me good at pain dissociation. The recovery from this was intense. After a week in the hospital and about a month post-operation, I still had 6 of 8 drains in place, twice daily wet-to-dry bandage changes over the struggling skin where I had radiation a decade before, and emergency surgery for an abdominal post-operation infection they misdiagnosed until it almost killed me, spending every day and night in a reclining position because I could not stand up straight or lay flat while everything healed, all the oxycodone, Vicodin no longer working. I finally cracked and cried like I never had before. I wondered, maybe I should not have done this one. The pain and exhaustion were overwhelming, and I fully lost my ability to handle it gracefully. Felt so good to cry and let it all go. To just admit human frailty and acknowledge I was uncertain about my choice to have the reconstruction. I think I started to take a turn for the better after that. A year later, I had a couple revision surgeries, then areola tattoos, and another surgery where they folded the tissue into nipple-like structures. I still had to do wet-to-dry changes for a good year, and then it took another 5 years or so for it to fully scar over completely. It looks like a melting burn the size of my palm, but it's honest, and I love it. I am 14 years out from all the reconstruction, and 22 years out from my initial diagnosis. I love my scars, I love it all, and I am so glad I did the reconstruction. It really was worth it. This is the most I have ever written on Reddit by far, and I appreciate the opportunity to remember all this. It is a gratitude renewal. Story 5. While in labor without pain medication, they had to do a manual rotation. This is where the doctor or midwife puts their hand inside to rotate the baby. I could feel every bit of it, and it still gives me nightmares sometimes, even 5 years later. However, my baby and I did okay, which is all I cared about. Story 6. Being run over from my ankle to my shoulder and having road rash across 40% of my body. Front teeth broken and knocked out. Story 7. Had an ingrown nail removed from my big toe. Soon after the anesthetic wore off, someone accidentally stepped on it. Story 8. Cluster headaches feel like a hot ice pick stabbing in the eye. On top of that pain, during the attack, it sometimes feels like the ice pick is jabbed harder and jerked up and down, creating more intense pain than just having the ice pick in the eye. Some attacks last 3 to 4 hours. Story 9. Nerve pain from herniated lumbar 5 disc. Fentanyl, morphine, diazepam, and Dilaudid did not relieve the pain. Could not sleep more than 2 hours a night for over 2 weeks. The herniation was putting pressure on the sacral 1 nerve root, causing muscle cramps. Could not stand up straight or sit or stand for more than 20 minutes. I have given birth by cesarean section with a failed epidural at 4 centimeters dilation. I have had a ruptured eardrum, and that nerve pain is the worst I have experienced because painkillers do not help. Story 10. Scalding hot soup melted through the takeout container on my lap in the car, causing second-degree burns to my thighs and crotch. When the doctor peeled my jeans away from the blistered skin, I felt sick thinking about it. Story 11. Woke up after inguinal hernia surgery. I learned every part of your body is connected to your groin. Turning your head and coughing is not very funny to me now. Story 12. Alcohol withdrawal. 6 months sober. Never going back, I think. Story 13. Getting an intrauterine device placed. I have had kidney stones and shattered my knee. Story 14. I tore my anterior cruciate ligament and had to ride a bus 7 hours back to our home hospital with no ice and 1 Tylenol. After the surgery, I was allergic to the antibiotics and developed full-body hives right after the night shift. I was not checked on the whole night, and on top of that, my call button did not work. I lay there for 6 hours, having a full-body allergic reaction, unable to move, scream, or call for help. For some context, it happened when I was in high school. We were playing football in a different state, and my parents were not at that game. It was a legendary hit where I broke his leg and a rib, and he did the same to me. We were both knocked unconscious. I had to ride the bus back because that was the quickest and cheapest way back. They were going that way anyway. It was penicillin that I found out I was allergic to, and after my anterior cruciate ligament surgery, they put my knee in one of those autoflexor devices that moved it for me. I was unable to get up, and the pain was so much I could scream. It felt like one of those nightmares where you scream and no voice comes out, except it actually happened. I did not sue because my parents were poor and could not afford a lawyer. I was healing really well, then slipped on some ice going to basketball practice and ruptured the meniscus of my other knee. It was not a good year, and my knees now hurt at 35. Become mathletes' kids, not athletes. Story 15. Withdrawal. Because of my disability, I have been on pain medication for almost my entire life. I got a new doctor who said that having me on all that pain medication was harmful and stopped it completely. The pain was so severe that the doctor thought I was about to have a heart attack because my heart rate increased drastically. I always thought most drug addicts were being dramatic about withdrawals, but absolutely not. I applaud anyone who is able to become sober while dealing with that pain. Story 16. Endometriosis. Not even fentanyl can relieve it when I am at a pain level of 10 out of 10. Story 17. When I tore my anterior cruciate ligament, I do not think I ever screamed so loud in my entire life. Story 18. I have trigeminal neuralgia, and it can be completely debilitating at times. There is a reason why doctors call it suicide disease. Story 19. Watching my father die is deeply emotional. You feel real pain watching someone you love more than life lose theirs. Story 20. Anal fissure was the worst. Eat lots of fiber, children. Migraine headaches are number 2. Toothaches are number 3. Story 21. Having an ovarian cyst rupture while also experiencing gastritis. Story 22. Every severe rheumatoid arthritis flare-up, especially when it affects the jaw and hits the trigeminal nerve, is intense. The pain is so bad that even though I have experienced dozens of flare-ups, I cannot remember how severe the pain is until the next one occurs. My brain blocks out all the details. The pain is so overwhelming that forming words or any cohesive thoughts is impossible. Imagine breaking your wrist, actually obliterating it. Every bone in your arm, wrist, and hand shattered into tiny pieces. Those pieces then turn into molten shards of razor blades. For 10 to 24 hours, that arm is put in a vice that is constantly compressed. There is no point where it stops getting worse. The pain does not throb or come in waves. It is a never-ending crescendo of agony that only intensifies. A constant state of pure torment. It feels like it has a will or personality and hates you more than you could imagine hating anyone or anything. You will panic. You will bargain with the universe or God. You will think about ending it all. You will dissociate. You might vomit or lose control of your bladder. Changes you. I cannot remember the person I was 6 years ago. All my actions and reasons have been replaced with doing everything in my power to avoid that place and survive when it inevitably happens. Story 23. Intrauterine device insertion. I have broken bones, had a dozen surgeries, and given birth, but nothing compares to that. Story 24. Multiple procedures during a medical coma when I could actually hear and feel everything. Story 25. I am 23 years old. So far, the worst pain I have ever felt was stomach pain from a miscarriage. Story 26. Ovarian cyst that ruptured. It has happened to me 3 times, and every time they think it is an ectopic pregnancy. The pain level is 10 out of 10. Story 27. I had a toothache that was at a 10 out of 10 for about a month. I spent my free time driving around to dental offices and emergency rooms, begging someone to help me. I looked and felt insane. I have a dentist, but I guess she does not pull teeth. Every orthodontist was booked for months. I was ready to get the pliers out when I finally found an orthodontist who said, "We would not leave you in that kind of pain. Come on in today," I cried. Story 28. Spinal surgery. I have had 4 of them so far. I have been living with chronic pain for the last 20 years. Genetic disease. Story 29. I got stung on the arch of my foot by a stingray. Lifeguards said it would take 90 minutes to feel better. The worst 90 minutes ever. Yes, I have given birth, but this was worse. The sting and throbbing lasted for 90 minutes. I ended up having the barb stuck and had it removed. It got infected. It was terrible. Story 30. Not lying when I say this, the worst pain I ever felt stemmed from a bicycle accident, but it was not from the leg I broke in said accident. Rather, it was from a massive bowel movement that I had 7 to 10 days later. As is often the case with a broken leg, I was laid out in bed for days on end. There was very little gravity assist in my digestion, which led to constipation. I took charcoal tablets and stool softener in hopes that, when the time finally arrived, the inevitable trip to the bathroom would go easily. It did not. Instead, it was like every calorie I had ingested for the previous week had piled up and condensed into a large, dense mass that hurt so much coming out that I wanted to scream. But I could not. I was in so much pain that I literally could not scream. It was intense, white-hot pain, the kind that wipes your mind of thought and leaves you gasping for breath when it is over. The kind of pain where you sit in shock for minutes afterward, processing what you just experienced. Before you ask, yes, it stopped up the toilet when I tried to flush it. It was not a good day. Story 31. The first one that comes to mind is having a burn debrided and cleaned. It is one of the very rare times that I screamed loudly. Another painful experience is having local anesthetic injected into the sole of my foot. That was intense, blinding pain. Story 32. If you consider the duration, then probably getting 2 teeth filled. I am immune to Novocaine. Story 33. I literally felt my heart break when my mother died. It was unexpected. I lost all my hearing for a full 24 hours and sat in total shock. I had to be taken by ambulance. All I remember about the call was feeling my heart tear apart. Story 34. I experienced an intense and painful situation on January 17, 2019, at approximately 8:50 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I was alone in a room, sweating with my hands against the walls. My family was on the other side of the door, worried and scared while I was screaming and writhing in extreme pain. I vividly remember, despite being an atheist, begging for a higher power to forgive my past mistakes. When that did not work, I went through a list of deities and gods from various religions, begging each one for forgiveness. As soon as I reached Uranus, it happened. To this day, I am unsure if I remained on the toilet or if I made it out alive. Regardless of what occurred, I am grateful that I am no longer in pain. Story 35. When I hit my middle toe so hard I destroyed my joint sac. My foot was black like a night sky for a month. Story 36. Fell right between the legs as a child on some playground equipment. Story 37. Deep vein thrombosis after a spinal fusion is difficult to describe. I remember seeing white, gasping for air, and begging for pain medication. Story 38. I was going to go with the obvious, breaking my arm at a young age, But the thing that actually affects me still is falling directly onto my tailbone when trying to roller skate the 3 feet from the front door rug to the couch. This happened last year in May, and it still hurts sometimes. Story 39. Gallbladder attack at the end. There was no stone, just a grapefruit-sized infected sac. It infected my pancreas and liver as well. Story 40. Sounds like nothing, but an ear infection was my downfall. Story 41. Childbirth, specifically the physiological process of transition, occurs when the baby prepares to pass through the pelvis into the birth canal. During my first labor, I was managing my contractions well, and for a moment, I thought, this isn't so bad. Then it felt like the baby had a sharp knife inside him that he was using to carve his way out. I instinctively screamed, "Hot knife," and the entire birth team immediately prepared, knowing from experience that the baby was about to be born. During my second labor, the same thing happened. My husband and I used "hot knife" as our code word to indicate the baby was about to arrive. The second labor was very fast, and the nurses initially didn't think I was fully dilated. My husband had to run to the nurse station and tell them, "She said hot knife, and she means it." The baby was born within the next 10 minutes. I have experienced gallstones and blocked bile ducts, kidney stones, had an abscess drained without anesthesia, intrauterine devices inserted and removed, broken bones, and more. None of those compare to hot knife. Story 42. I sliced the end of my finger off at work. That part didn't really hurt that much. My knives are very sharp. The doctors cauterized it, so it was still not that painful. What hurt was about a week later when I had the bandage off and I reached for the tap. I smashed the end of the finger hard on the steel handle. Everything went gray, and I could hear the sound of an AM radio looking for a station. Apparently, I stood there for a full minute without moving or even knowing what planet I was on. Story 43. I did not know what the pain was at the time it was happening, but it was my body shutting down from sepsis and respiratory failure due to a surgery complication. Story 44. Sounds unremarkable compared to other conditions, but a tonsil infection can be serious. You don't understand until you experience it. Story 45. Gout in the big toe does not sound like much to someone unfamiliar, but it is very painful. Story 46. I did cross-country in high school for 2 years. One night, I woke up to a sudden pain in my left leg. I grabbed it to feel what was wrong and found I had a golf ball-sized lump on the side of my calf. When I touched it, I felt the bundle of muscle twitch, and pain shot throughout my leg. I started to cry quietly to myself. In that moment, I considered yelling for my mom to help me. I was terrified, thinking I was going to lose my leg. The agonizing moment that felt like forever eventually subsided. Later, I learned this was a Charlie horse, a common thing among athletes. I had another one later, but it was less intense. Story 47. Acute alcoholic pancreatitis required hospitalization for a couple of weeks. I have not consumed alcohol in 5 years now. Story 48. Pilonidal cyst located on the tailbone caused by snowboarding and then having to sit on a 4-hour flight. It may not sound serious, but if you have experienced one, sitting upright was very painful. Story 49. I had a ganglion cyst on a tendon in my wrist. One way to get rid of these is sometimes to use a needle and draw the fluid out of the cyst. I went to my hand surgeon and was his last patient of the day. He prepped everything, and I was sitting with my hand ready on the table when his assistant walked in and said, "We don't have any local anesthesia." The doctor asked if they had numbing cream. "No, just cold spray." The doctor asked if I wanted to reschedule or try without numbing. I had already paid my specialist copay and did not want to take more time off work or pay another copay. So I said, "Let's do this." With no numbing, he inserted the needle deep into my wrist and started poking around. We knew approximately where the cyst was, but not exactly its size or location. After probing my muscles, tendon, and joint, he tried to draw fluid out, but nothing entered the syringe, so he removed the needle. He then asked for another needle. The assistant said they did not have more of the smallest size, only the next size up. The doctor said, "All right, fine." He then used the larger needle and did more poking and prodding. Though he never drew any fluid, the cyst eventually disappeared, so I guess one of his jabs pierced it. The assistant seemed surprised that I endured it without complaint or tears. The doctor cleaned some blood and bandaged my wrist. I left and sat in my car for 20 minutes wondering what had just happened. I couldn't bend my wrist for a few days, but then it was fine. All's well that ends well. Story 50. Bone marrow biopsies are performed awake and without pain relief. This procedure can be very uncomfortable. Story 51. Cluster headache. It felt like knives were slowly but surely moving in my brain. I was just 12, and this was on April 1st, 2019, which was also Easter Sunday. I walked into my mother's room around 4 in the morning. I took a pain medication and lay down in her bed, but the pain worsened. I was screaming uncontrollably and shaking in pain. I had to take a much stronger medication, and after about 2 hours, I finally started to get relief and passed out completely unconscious. Somehow, I woke up just an hour later, fortunately feeling better. My mother was almost certain I was going to the emergency room since the pain lasted so long. After months of fighting for an MRI scan of my brain and cervical spine, it turned out I have one of the worst cases of Chiari type 1 malformation my doctor has ever seen in a child. Unfortunately, this has left me with severe chronic pain over the past few years, worsening especially in recent months. Story 52. Bone pain from chemotherapy felt like someone was hitting all my joints at once with a giant hammer. Additionally, it caused severe vomiting. Story 53. Having an intrauterine device inserted. The second most intense pain is extreme menstrual cramps or an ovarian cyst. Both are enough to make you almost pass out and vomit. I have broken bones that hurt less than any of these. Story 54. Gout in my big toe made my broken ribs feel like a gentle hug. Story 55. Recovering from brain surgery. I almost became addicted to pain medication, but fortunately, the neurologist stopped prescribing it and refused to provide any more refills. Story 56. Nearly dying from septic shock 2 years ago. Apparently, if you allow bacteria from your gastrointestinal tract to travel to your hip joint, become an infected blood clot, and spread throughout the bloodstream, the infection is strong enough to eat away at your hip joint and poison your body. This requires massive antibiotics and pain medications such as morphine, fentanyl, hydromorphone, and ketamine for 17 days, 4 of which were in the intensive care unit. Once the septic blood clot was surgically removed, the real work began. Relearning how to sit up, slide to the side of the bed, stand, walk, and so on. None of this is easy when you are 60 years old and already have chronic pain due to back and nerve issues. I condemn the hospital in Maryland that failed to diagnose me properly, causing me to fly across the country with the septic blood clot deteriorating my health. I eventually had to have that hip replaced. While I was in the intensive care unit, I saw my angels. They told me not yet. So I fought with what little strength I had to recover. I won despite the odds. Usually, when a patient is misdiagnosed and sepsis is left untreated in the body for a while, the fatality rate is 60%. Thank God for my husband advocating for me and for my faith, neither of which I would ever want to go without. The hospital that saved my life has the best staff and physicians anywhere, and I am eternally grateful for their excellence. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.